Well, guys, welcome. We've got Colin Creech, who's a good personal friend. He is a Force Recon Marine, still in the Marine Reserves, self-proclaimed failed base jumper.
Yes.
But you say it's self-proclaimed. It's.
I mean, it's pretty clear that I'm a failed base jumper. I definitely can say that I've done base jumps since my big, I wouldn't say it's a failure, learning experience that was very painful, but also a growth experience at the same time, right? And it's kind of great when you get those, right? Because it's, oh, well, I didn't die, but I can do things a lot better next time if I ever go back into that endeavor. So
yeah, it also reinforces your mortality.
It's very clear. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it did. I've got a very similar experience. Can you also say where you work, or is that privileged information?
I would say that I work, for a Fortune 40 company that's, focuses in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology space, specifically focused on human capital. So that's my day job. And then a lot of the things that, I've been partnering with you on and all my pursuits outside of work, are I would say really my passion areas too. I love my job. I love what I do, but, it's also at the end of the day with life, like what impact am I making outside of, also earning a living and having a career that I am passionate about, but I want to do more.
I just spoke at a conference. It's the Mental Health Conference Association or something like that in or something like that in Kansas City, but mostly mental health companies. And I said one of the things about human resources, because again, Talent Wars about human resources. I said, I really dislike the name human resources.
Yeah.
When I think human resources, I think like a generalist who handles pay, benefits, things like that. It's you said the human capital piece of it. So when you have a CHRO, again, a title I dislike, I like Chief Talent Officer, Chief People Officer. It's reinforcing that we're all about human capital. We have a talent mindset. We believe in people are our greatest strength. You went through the leadership development program, which is competitive to get into with this organization, and they put you in pretty much every department they want you to touch.
Yeah, I think it's extremely the way that my company does it is just amazing, because I think there's a stat that veterans getting out of the service, they end up leaving their first job out of the military in the corporate world within the first 6 months. And so, with my company, and what I think with a lot of that comes to is you get out and you're like, I'm going to do this. And you're like, I don't like this. Yeah. And then you got to go figure out something else. And so the program that I went through, a military veteran leadership development program, it's an 18-month program, 3 6-month rotations. And in some ways you almost have free reign to say, I want to try this. I want to try that. I want to try this. And I think that's where you see like, a much stronger retention rate with people that come through this program. Because it's like, I was able to find what I thought I would want to, what I could see myself doing for my initial parts of my career. Surprisingly for me, doing something in supply chain, doing something in pharmaceutical marketing, and then doing something in HR, I was like, I'm a Force Recon Marine that I really like HR. I think part of it was the culture, part of it was just incredible leaders, and I was like, I guess I'm gonna do this. And I've had a blast and a lot of growth ever since.
Did that shock a lot of leaders? They're like, you want to go HR, not...
Oh yeah, Oh yeah. Specifically on like the commercial general management side, they're like HR, and I was like, yeah, I really like it. I was like, I don't think this person's like really feeling it, but I was like, hey, you got to do what you like and what works for you. So yeah.
We need more programs like that. There were quite a few programs like that in the 80s, 90s. Yeah. PepsiCo had a big one. Of course, you guys have sustained the program. Those are great programs.
Yeah.
Well, really quickly, where were you born, raised, and what led you into the Marine Corps post high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, just north of Dallas, Texas. Growing up, I had a really awesome upbringing. I live in an area that's is very safe, very sheltered in a good way, and I was playing tennis in high school. I hated contact sports. I was just all the things that you wouldn't expect for then somebody to go do something, and I think it was more or less into my junior year in high school, beginning of my senior year in high school, I was thinking like, oh no, like, am I going to be kind of this kind of individual the rest of my life, like just scared of all these things? And so I was, no offense if anybody listening to this is in the Army, but I went to an Army recruiter. I think I was about to sign a National Guard contract, and somebody made a joke to me. My dad did actually, who's never been in the military, and he was, you know what Army stands for? I was like, no. He was like, aren't ready for Marines yet. And I was like, oh no, like my dad, who's never been in the military, shooting a shot. And I was like, well, I can't do that, I guess now. So then next thing I was going to the Marine recruiter. I was like, people talk crap on the Marines, but all the jokes, back at the end of the day is like, these guys are hard. And so, I signed up for an infantry open contract and I was like, okay, I'll do 4 years, like 4 really hard years, and then I can be lazy the rest of my life. Little did I know that, all the things that I learned throughout those 4 years really set me up, honestly, on just a completely different, a different journey that I could have never imagined. It wasn't just 4 years. I ended up doing a total of 7 years on active duty, and then about another 6 in the reserve, some kind of, mixed time. So not only just one deployment, ended up doing 4 deployments total, ended up getting my degree online at the same time. And I just kind of continued to just see like, oh, I can do more. I can do more. And I also saw the benefit of education. I think going into it, they're like, free college, this and that. I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. But then after I was like, oh, I think an education is definitely going to help set me up for success. But I kind of want to continue to do both at the same time. So I can tell you there was times on my second and third deployment, I'd do homework until like 9 or 10 at night, then wake up at 4 a.m., do a little bit more homework until we had this, start doing the things we need to do for the day, and then rinse and repeat. And I still to this day don't really know how I did it, being younger, probably more testosterone and all the other things too, but I was just committed to being like, I gotta crush and do good work in my job with the Marine Corps on this deployment, but I've got to get this education out of the way as well.
West Coast, East Coast?
So I went, for the Marine Corps, I went boot camp, and then I went to the basic reconnaissance course on the West Coast, and then I was stationed. My first duty station was 2nd Recon on the East Coast, Camp Lejeune.
Yeah. Good, just great leadership in the Marine Corps. I mean, what impressed you to stay for 7 years?
Yes. So I actually was very fortunate to have good and bad leaders, and I think that's everywhere. I think sometimes people see the military and there's this like, stigma is like everybody knows how to lead and everybody knows how to do this. But actually I thought kind of the executive, leadership probably certificate I walked away from with the Marine Corps was, I like this leader. I like this trait of this leader. I want to do that. I see this leader as like, I don't want to be anything like this person, and I think it was a really good foundation to just also see like, because I think a lot of us, there's probably things that we're really good at and that's what we do, but I think there's other things where you observe and you're like, how can I bring more of that into my life? And I think it's one of those trial and error things too. I think there was times when I was a people leader too, where I was like, oh no, like that probably wasn't the right approach. It worked, but like I wasn't bringing into some of those leadership positions what I would have wanted to, and it's just continuing to grow and iterate. I think some people just get stuck and that's their limit. But to me, at the end of the day, I think my biggest like experiences in life have always come through, how do I get better? How do I refine this? How do I grow? I think especially on the leadership side, and just, having that ability, this is something I've been doing more and more, is like when I don't know something, say I don't know it, but also surround yourself with people that probably do know that, to get out of that groupthink mentality and fill your gaps with just awesome people that are on your team.
That's probably one of the least seen things by people that never served in the military, is that actually we tell you, hey, if you don't know, just simply say you don't know. It's okay. Yeah. No one's passing judgment. Well, yeah. I mean,
they say
we're going to make comments,
stupid questions, but yeah,
just stupid people.
Yeah.
It's amazing the ability of, I say the Marine Corps, the military as a whole, to spark something in young kids, young men and women, and completely transform them. And in large part, that is, what I say a form of behavioral modeling or observational learning is when you work for great leaders, you're like, oh, the bar just raised. Yeah. And I'm going to emulate them and how they do things. And it really is, I'll show you. Yeah. And then do as I do. And funny enough, I just linked up with my first platoon sergeant.
Nice.
Staff Sergeant Eddie Ford.
Nice.
And he wrote a book called Postcards from Hell, I believe it is. And so I'm going to have him on. So basically when he got out, he was a second Force Recon guy, came over to 1st Recon Battalion, was my platoon sergeant. Great dude. And then when he got out, I think he was either Triple Canopy or Blackwater, one of those companies. Yeah. And he was delivering the mail in Afghanistan. So they had, via mobility, going through Helmand, getting blown up. Yeah. But they knew the importance of getting the mail to soldiers at the outstations.
The morale boost from that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can't wait to bring him on because I've got all these photos.
That's awesome.
Compromising photos of all of us at a very young age. What was the ultimate decision to I guess depart active duty, move to reserves?
Yeah. So my first 4 years were on active duty. I think it's everybody's got those stories, but I got back from my first deployment. I was like, okay, I want to do even more. So I signed up, I wanted to go to MARSOC selection. I was like, this is the next thing I should do. And then I had a lot of time after that first deployment between then and selection. I was like, okay, like I do really want to do this. I do want to continue to grow here, but at the same time, the original plan, while I knew it wasn't going to work out the way I wanted to, I was like, there's no way I can be lazy the rest of my life now. There's like too much growth, and I can see I can go a lot further. I just don't know what that looks like yet. So kind of last minute before that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get out. I'm going to stay in the reserves because I don't want to be done yet. This is it's part of my identity, and I just wanted to still be connected with a lot of those great individuals. So that's when I went to a reserve force recon company. And started going to school. I think an interesting story coming out of that was my first week of college I missed because I was with this new reserve unit, and they're like, "What school do you want to go to? Like any school you want?" I was like, "Well, I haven't been to this school or that school," so I went to this school called Sears School. But long story short, I show up to my first day of college a week late. All the teachers were cool about it, and typical 22-year-old E5 at the time, I think. I drove a motorcycle because I was like, I'm going to save money, and it's 110 degrees in Texas in August. But I was like, this is awesome. First day of college, I get there. School was interesting. I was like, okay. Like, I think I got this. Go outside. I'm like, where's my motorcycle? And so, like, first day of school, right out of that other, military training I just finished, my motorcycle's gone. So it was one of those, I was like, is this still part of the games, or did I miss something? So it was
stolen.
Yeah, stolen.
You're kidding me.
And no cameras outside this school. I won't name drop this community college that I went to, but it was, and the very nice officer on site was like, "You're never going to see this again, but I'll write the report. Like, good luck." And I was like, "Okay." So like a lot of interesting experiences there.
You are a true professional. Yeah. And you are great at your job.
Yeah, and then after that, I did like 2 semesters of community college, and at that time, the reserve unit I was with was looking for volunteers to do deployments in Latin America. Specifically, like supporting our neighbors to the south and their ability to combat transnational criminal organizations. I think sometimes they called cartels. And that's, I think, those deployments. And I think that's where, not making the decision to kind of continue to try and pursue higher levels, echelons of groups within our own military actually really paid off, because then I ended up doing 2 years straight on that deployment. And that's when I met probably one of the best leaders in my entire life, an E9 Master Guns. I'll call him Caesar. I won't name drop his whole thing on this, but that was one of the most influential leaders, moving forward after that. Because I show up, first thing I see is this Hispanic dude, bald, tatted to the gills. We all knew he was like, he had 3 deployments before the invasion. Did like 3 or 4 more deployments after that. The dude was hard. And first time I see him, he's like, "Do you speak Spanish?" So I was like, I think I said like, "I speak a little bit." Yeah. He was like, "No, you don't. Get the F out of here." And I was like, oh, great. This is going to go terrible. And what I really loved about this guy is he just kept putting the right amount of pressure on people. And then, when we were deployed, like on the weekends, he's like, "Hey, Creech, come to like wherever I'm staying on this foreign base." And he's like, "We're going to do some like PME." And every weekend he'd have me like figuring something else out that had nothing to do with the job. And it was kind of like this continual pressure test with him to see, okay, is this how far can I push this guy? Like, what's his real growth potential? And it was probably one of the most like developing parts in the military, but also the impact outside the military. Because this is some, E9 that also had like 2 masters at that point. Was incredibly well spoken, and I will say, like, now we're best friends. Now we actually both work at the same company outside of the military as well, and we're family today. But at the time, scared to death, I was like, who is this guy? I'm like, he's got way more experience than me, but he was so smart, and he knew the way to kind of put the right amount of military pressure on you, but also when he saw people that were really investing in themselves outside of the military, that's where he was also like, okay, you actually see the bigger picture of things. I think what he had accomplished by the time he got to the E9 rank was, I'm needing to speak to the same level of potentially some of the officers, or to a higher level, and how do you communicate with them? And that was probably one of the best setups for me for when I finally went into corporate America, because okay, I've got this leadership experience. I've led organizations of over 200 individuals, like multinational, individuals in a foreign country. But then how do you also then translate all that and be able to speak the language outside of the military and translate all that experience as well? So I owe so much to one, like his scary mentorship at first, but what really turned out to be like the best, mentorship I ever received for sure to that date.
Sometimes it's good to be feared. Great leaders do that. Great leaders continually, or let me say this, they know when to push. Mm-hmm. They also know when to let off and actually to reinforce. Yeah. But, one of the best leaders I ever had was a guy named Chris Fussell, who's now the president of McChrystal Group. Yeah. McChrystal being General McChrystal. So he was a mentee of General McChrystal. And then I remember the first time we met Chris, he had taken over as commander of our squadron. He's like, hey, I want all the officers in my office at like 10 a.m. on Friday. Nice. And it was just like, hey, my guys are going out to train. I don't have time because I always felt like a shitbag and my guys were out training and I wasn't with them. It's like the prototypical like officer from the movie, like you men go forward and I will
do this hard training, but I can't make it today. AC is calling my name. So
it's the band of brothers, that officer who's like, I'm going to go to the HQ. You men stay here. Yeah. So I went with the chip on my shoulder, but again, it was either 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. every Friday. He'd pull the officers in and do PME. You said PME, professional military education, which could be mentorship, could be coaching, and he poured into us. And I'll share with you. One day I've got to share this with the world. He was serving in a commander role overseas, in which he probably averaged 4 hours of sleep a night. And as I was leaving his squadron to go to another squadron, he wrote me a 5-page email. And I still have that 5 thing. Pages. Will's read that from Chris Fussell. I mean, the thing is just gold. And he talked about mentorship and pouring into to those below you as McChrystal had done to him. And actually, he helped pen the book, I think, Team of Teams, and then he wrote his own book, One Mission. Phenomenal. And I've had a number of those mentors, both senior enlisted and officers. Another good one is actually an admiral now, Mark Schaefer. I don't know where he's at, but I love hearing that in the Marine Corps. The military understands that well. The military has built a culture. It's built a system on coaching, mentoring, and continually pouring into the generation coming behind you to make them better than we were. And that's the whole fucking point.
And I think that's where sometimes in the military and in corporate America, there's those failures where it's like you're telling people, you're like, do this, do that, but you're also not thinking from a talent standpoint. It's like, how can I also create the person that can then replace me, And in some cases, if you can take your ego out of it as well, like, but this person's a great, how can I actually make them, or how can I influence and mentor them, appropriately? Like, hell yeah, if they end up being better than me, go higher in the ranks than me, I don't want to be the person that like hindered somebody's career because my own ego, I couldn't take that. I'm like, this person's special. They could go somewhere. And I think that's where you see it in the military sometimes too. Sometimes ego gets in the way, but sometimes you just have these leaders who are like, I'm going to just, give them all the information I can possibly give them. If they're the person that's open to that, good, the bad, the ugly, give them that tough conversation, but also give them those little pieces of wisdom. And I think that's where you can really stand yourself out too, because to your point, you talked about that 5-page email. I have a folder in my work email I call Smiles. It's just where I put all those awesome emails, sometimes just to revisit. Maybe you're having an off day. You're like, man, like those are the emails that make this all worth it because, somebody said thank you or somebody wrote this nice thing. You're like, okay.
Anchor points.
I
call those anchor points.
Yeah, it's a cookie jar. You need just a cookie that day. You're like, go through those emails.
No. We don't need cookies.
I mean, sometimes you need some protein. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. Are they crumble cookies? Because I'm in.
I had those. They're.
Have you had crumble cookies?
Yes,
dude. Like Jordan and I did go through this. We went through it last night. We were like looking at the menu. We're like, okay, let's do it because we told ourselves 30 days. Every 30 days we can have a crumble order and go crazy. And we're about to do it. And she's like, no, we can't. I'm like, damn it, you're right.
Yeah.
But they were so fucking good.
Yeah. You got to have somebody in your life that's keeping you accountable. So yeah, credit to her.
She's good. Yeah. She, you freaked her out last night came to the house. You beat me to the house, and
I text you. Yeah,
she's like, "Well, who the fuck is this 6'1", 210-pound guy at my door?" She's like, "Oh, he's wearing an out of shirt, so he must be."
I thought that would help. Yeah, too, and I did my best. Like, hi, I think I beat Mike over. So like maybe she just knew I was stalking you, and I knew your pattern of life. But she was so nice too, and yeah, she threatened to kick my butt, but didn't. I was like, I promise he's here soon. I just he was going to show me a few things, and I leave. I don't want to interrupt dinner. I'm sorry. So yeah.
Well, if Bane was with her, Bane sitting right here, it would be a different story.
It was the other one that's very old.
That's Dash.
Very sweet dog.
Dash is he's he's like a walking Chewbacca.
He's a great. Or I was thinking an Ewok.
Ewok.
Yeah.
So at what point did you get military free fall while in the military?
Great question. No.
Did you get static line?
Yes. So
hated static line.
And I think that's one of those things. Another good reason for me joining the military was, I think there's a book Ryan Holiday wrote, which is called The Obstacles Away. Mm-hmm. My friend Chris just turned me on to it, but I'm a big fan of all of Ryan Holiday's stuff, like Daily Stoic. But, I was scared of heights before. I was scared of everything before the military. And so you don't really get a choice in some ways. But, my thought was, oh, yeah. I'll just go into a recon company. I'll get in a jump platoon, because I didn't really want to go to dive school. I was scared of that too. I was scared of everything, but first thing first, they sent me to dive school instead right away, and I was like, oh no. So going through the
so you went through MCD.
I did, but the pre-dive alone is the most legendary part, as you remember, a 2-week battalion screener. I think 35 guys were there, and at the end of the day, 5 of us passed. It was one of those like, okay. And then you get to actual dive school and it wasn't as bad as a screener. You're like, all right, there's that thing too, right? Which I think it goes back to like, train how you fight. So like making that way worse. Then when you get there, you're so much more comfortable and all the other, activities are a little more easy to overcome. But yeah, so then I did go to jump school. So I was, what do they call it? The Cyclops. I just was like the bubble boy for a little bit. And then I went to static line jump school. Also got over my fear of heights there as well. And then I think that was when I started skydiving outside of the military. I was like, okay, kind of interested in this. My friend talked me into a tandem, and I was like, I really want to do this. So I started getting my A license and getting into skydiving on my first enlistment. That's really where I was like, I really kind of am interested in skydiving now that I'm not afraid of heights anymore. And so free fall, I think, was one of those when I was actually making the decision to get out. You get sat down by a sergeant major. He's like, hey, if you stay in, we'll send you to sniper school. We'll send you to free fall. And I was like, I'm already skydiving outside the military. I don't know if that's really going to sell it for me anymore.
I love how they wait they're like, oh, you're thinking of getting out. Okay, we'll
retention
then
risk,
we'll send you to sniper school. Like, well, why wouldn't you send me to sniper school a year ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to love the military. Sometimes
it's a retention risk, right? They know it works. Sometimes people, that's what they want. So
you know what? I loved it. So static line was hard to get when I was at 1st Recon Battalion.
Really?
And it was. So I was a Cyclops.
Heck yeah, man! I appreciate that.
But then you'd run into some like log sue, or what do we used to call them? Like
ops streak, or I don't know,
a Marine that does logistics.
Yeah,
and they're wearing a jump pin. And you're like, hey, how'd you get to jump school? And like, oh, well, I was going to get out after 8 years, and they offered that to get me to stay in. And you're like, mother. Yeah, that's the one thing that pissed me off about the Marine Corps at the time. I think there was a lot of those things where I thought highly of the Marines and their capability. Yeah. But the old General Al Gray, every Marine is special.
Yeah. We are all special.
Every Marine is hey, God bless every single Marine that serves in whatever capacity they are. But there is, when it comes to performance, capability, and capacity, you've got to bucket people. Yeah. There's a normal distribution with regards to talent, whether you're in recon, you're in the SEALs, you're at a tier 1, that normal distribution always exists. So at what point did you get into base jumping? What made you make that leap? Because I would never do that. Yeah, I still would never do that.
Yeah. I was 22 or 3.
Okay, there you go.
And so I just got with my reserve unit. I met this guy, and he was at my reserve unit, but he was also a stunt guy, and he was like already a way more accomplished skydiver. I think I had like 50 skydives at that point, which is not the right way to kind of progress. But he's like, I'm going to go to this first jump course in Twin Falls, Idaho. He's like, you want to go? And I was like, I just said yes to everything, He ended up bailing out last minute. So I just went alone to Twin Falls, Idaho, went through this like 4-day first jump course, you know, which all of these things at this point, if you look at, I'm pretty sure it's the same way now today. Like there's skydiving equipment. It's all got a lot more rigor and testing and regulations. That stuff, pretty much, I think it always says something like, this is not like, this is not a, you know, there's a lot more like wiggle room with all the caution labels and all those things too, because it's not like a sport managed by a really intense governing body. It's more just like some dude in a shed who kind of gives out good ideas. And it's grown a lot too. There's some really reputable companies, and it was good then too. But yeah, I went to this first jump course, did like 13 jumps. So BASE is an acronym, right? This is in 2013. BASE is an acronym for building, antenna, span, earth, span being like a bridge, earth being like a cliff. And so, you know, I just was obsessed with like getting things done. So went to that course, bought a base rig. And then I was like, I got to get on the other objects, which you should not progress that fast. I definitely didn't have that many jumps of any kind that I should be doing it. But I think within like 15 more base jumps.
Young. Yeah.
But within being like 15 base jumps in, but I think by the time I had like 30 base jumps, I had already done a building, you know, somewhere. I'm not going to say where. I'd already done an antenna, I'd already done a cliff, and I had what they call a base number. And there's I think a group of individuals, it could change by now, but the base numbers 3 and 4. So they're the ones to do the third and fourth time. And I think they were in Houston that kind of manage it. So you kind of send them a cool letter, like I did this, this, and this, and they'll issue you a base number. So I'm number 1,752 to jump off of all 4 objects. And that was in like 2013 or 14. Quick turnaround. You know, it was definitely one of those like, okay, and I got away with it. And I think that's, you know, kind of, we'll get to it, but like what led to my accident, because I kept getting away with it. I just kept getting lucky. It wasn't like I was not a good canopy pilot, you know, flying. I could land sometimes standing up, you know, and so, yeah, I just kept pushing it and having a blast with it, you know, and people say, are you an adrenaline junkie? I think actually more for me, it was like, okay, how do I do this? I think it was the recon side of me too. Like if you're going to go, not that I would ever do it, like go jump off a building. It's like, well, how do you get in? Where would you land? Like, you know, taking in data into account, like what's the height, you know, what are the winds like? And I was really intrigued by that too, because it was kind of combining 2 worlds as well, like reconnoitering something and
reconnoiter. Yeah.
Reconnoiter.
Now you got
how
me.
do you say that word?
Reconnoiter.
Oh yeah. Well, I was a Marine, so, you know, I think I passed our spelling for Marines.
Well, I remember too, the last part of the screener into reconnaissance was spell reconnaissance.
Yeah. And I can do it now, but I'm not going to do it on this podcast. It's RECON. That's where I leave it. Recon. I was Recon Marine. Recon Marine. Yeah. There's a W in there somewhere. I think there's like a Z at some point. Yeah. So got in, moved really quick through that sport.
What number jump were you on when you? Okay, so you're in Italy, correct? Yeah. In what region?
So in northern Italy, it's Trento. So there's like 3 major lakes. You know, I think everybody knows like Lake Como. This is Lake Garda. So it's like there's like Lake Como. Don't know what this one is, and Lake Garda, and then right near it is this kind of like Mecca base jumping. It's a legal cliff. I think you jump from like around. It's like a 4,000-foot elevation change from where you jump to actually where you land. So you can get a lot of incredible fall. And I think I went there with another course this company was running. So it was kind of like, you know, learning to track and do bigger objects, which is something that's not as easily accessible in the U.S., especially the National Park Services and things. Like a lot of the places where you might be able to do it, it's not legal. So I got off my 3rd deployment at that point in the reserves. It was 2015. I think at that point I had high 90 base jumps. Probably I'd gotten a lot more skydives at that point. I think I had a C license, and I think I probably had like 300 skydives, but I wasn't current because I just got off a deployment. So I'd done a few more jumps. I did an antenna in this area locally, like the night before I flew out. Is my mic working?
Yeah.
Oh, it's cutting out. But anyways, and I jumped with a local guy here. It was an Army Ranger medic. We did an antenna like the night before I flew out, and it was a bad jump. I landed perfectly. He jumped, and then his parachute opened the wrong way. He impacts this object, the antenna, and he's just sitting up there. And I was like, oh no, you know, and I hated heights still, but I was like, I already jumped off this thing. I was like, do I have to climb back up this thing and go see if this guy's okay? And so I climbed back up like 200 feet, external ladder to check on this guy to see if he's okay. And I get up there. I'm like, if this guy, I hope he's okay. And he's like, he landed somehow, his parachute opened facing the antenna, landed somehow the wrong way, and just impacts the antenna. So he's kind of stuck between the crevices. So you've seen a lot of those antennas. They're like a triangle shape. They're like, I think this one was like 240 feet up. And so I'm like, hey man, are you okay? As I'm like death gripping the ladder at like 200 feet, no safety gear, no ability to climb in. He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, all right, if I can help get you down, like I'll come back later and like bring some stuff so I can help get your parachute down. He was like, no man, I want to get it down now. I was like, what? And it's like all wrapped around this antenna. So the guy did most of the work. I can say as I was sitting there death gripping the ladder, I'm just kind of like getting this line out for you, And so we somehow got it off, the parachute off the antenna. We climb back down. As soon as we get to the ground, the guy just starts like blacking out. And I was like, oh no. And this guy, I don't want to give too much information on him. He was a ranger, he was a big dude, maybe like 240. So I think his size also helped him because like he didn't break anything, but his shin was cut up and he was bleeding. And this would probably be a sign for me to probably get out of the sport or something at that point. But we were able to get him back, towards his car. So he basically just crawled back to his car at that point with me walking with him. And then he got into his car. I was like, you want me to take you to the hospital? He's like, nah. He's like, I was a medic. I was like, I'm just going to go home and like super glue the cut and I'll be fine. Was completely fine. But that was one of those like, oh, this sport, I know this is dangerous. I kind of like had a few broken bones at that point too. And then I flew to Italy like the next day to go go do this course and really get into tracking. So it wasn't wingsuits at that point that I was using. It's called a tracking suit. So it also inflates, but it's kind of a good first way to start doing it. And it was supposed to be, my goal was, because I was going to college online still at that point, was I'm going to go base jump in Europe until I go broke, just using kind of my GI Bill and doing school at night. And I'm just going to really live into this professional base jumping life. And that lasted about 36 hours. So I land there. The night before, we were drinking before we started this course, and I was like, maybe I should get some travel insurance. So I purchased this like $100 travel insurance the night before. We did 3 jumps that day. First jump, I think I got like a 17-second free fall. It's on video, and I was like, this is insane. It was really next level. That's that's longer than a hop and pop and skydive, which where you jump at like 5,000 feet. And then the third jump of the day, there's some footage too. Basically, it's kind of funny. I think I was looking at the guy that was teaching us, and I was like, any last words? He's like, have a great time. So it's kind of an interesting way to then go do a jump. It was a good jump. There's still, feedback. We're just trying to figure out the tracking and how to do it. And I was pretty heavy at that time, so my track wasn't that great. I made a little bit of distance, but beginner, Parachute opened fine. Everything went really well. And I think this goes to the inexperienced part. So then I was going to land in this like cul-de-sac at still, pretty high up into this gorge over where this cliff is. And so there's a lot of ways I could have easily landed that parachute, but I was just burning off altitude in like a very junior way. I was just, we call it crabbing. It's where you're just kind of like crabbing back and forth. And so I crabbed and I was like, I think I can go around this tree and land in this cul-de-sac. And so when I was going around this tree, which is, increasing my speed, like one line of my parachute caught like one branch. And this tree was already on top of like a 30-foot hill. So basically my parachute caught, swung me around the tree. And at that point, my parachute has collapsed. So I probably fell like, I would say 30 or 40 feet going at like a pretty hot speed. And then I hit, and I've slowed the GoPro down enough that I can tell you exactly how things happened. And then I hit the ground, my head hit the ground, then my GoPro broke off. I probably bounced another 15 feet, and my GoPro bounced with me, not connected anymore, and landed facing me. So then I got all this extra great footage too. But what had happened is I crushed my right heel, so I kind of impacted to the side. I would call it a PLF. It was a pretty kind of close one. And then as soon as my right heel hit, which crushed the heel as the calcaneus and talus crushed together, then as I was falling, my left knee hit. So then my femur broke right above like the left knee, bounced. I actually thought my elbow was maybe broken, but we have the footage. We can share it at some point too.
We'll be putting it in the Men's Journal editorial.
Yeah. And so then I, tried to get up, saw like the weirdest bend of my life, in the leg. And so I laid back down, and people are always like, you didn't make a single noise. Well, I like to joke like, well, from my career as a recon Marine, it's like suffer in silence. Yeah. But it was also like, I was like, what am I going to say? Right. And I was definitely in shock for like a solid 10 minutes. And so I laid there 10 minutes. I kind of tried to get up again. I was like, oh no, like I can't move. So I laid there for 10 minutes. And I will say it was probably like the most beautiful 10 minutes of my life. Like it was like the perfect amount of shock, perfect amount of like, head trauma. I was like, man, these mountains are beautiful. Like, this is really great. Like, it wasn't like that scary at that point. I was just kind of like, oh, like, well, this kind of sucks. So then one of my really good friends then landed. He's like, hey, how did it go? He's like, are you okay? And I was like, I broke my legs. And he was like, oh, and so he comes over. A few other guys land in the same place. We'd all kind of planned we'd land in that area. And, none of us spoke Italian. So then we're like, how do you call 911 in Italy? So we had to figure that out too. And so it took about 2 hours for them to get there. At that point, I lost about like 2.5 liters of blood internally on the femur side. And conveniently, I think the rig, because I had not taken my base rig off, tourniquet. I turned it into a tourniquet on the left leg. Yeah. And so finally an ambulance got there and they're like, oh no, you need to get care flighted. And I was like, okay. So I waited another amount of time. They get there. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Italian, but I spoke enough Spanish that I was able to say, like, I was like, oh, dolor, I'm in pain. I like using more words than that because I was more fluent at that time. I was like, I'm in pain. They're like, yeah, okay, we can see that. And so my friends, being amazing people that they are, started filming the whole thing too. They're like, we're going to document this. So they were very nice, but there was some like botched care at the same time. Like they did not put my femur in traction. So you see him like rolling me onto a spine board and you just see the leg flopping. And sorry for viewers, we don't need to show that part, but making some fun noise and cussing him out a little bit. It's like, I know not to do that, but that's just my military experience, put it in traction, but also don't strap you down like over the broken femur and stuff too. And then they gave me probably some sort of painkiller. And then I can tell you that was probably the last painkiller I got the entire time, the 8 days I was in the hospital. I can go into more detail there, but I'll stop. But the hospital experience alone was another really fun experience too.
So they got you out of the country as quickly as you could be evacuated to the United States.
That's where that travel insurance came in. So
I call no doubt.
They questioned it for a second. They're like, well, it went into effect at midnight, and then this accident happened like 14 hours later. They were questioning it a little bit at first. I was like, we can question it now. I wasn't that good at words still at that point. I was like, or I can just get a lawyer and we can figure this out later. They're like, okay. So what they did with this travel insurance that doesn't cover base jumping anymore, good call on them. I got a surgery done in Italy, and then they sent a nurse out from Dallas, and this awesome dude, he was like a traveling nurse. He does these trips like to remote places with this place all the time. Harley motorcycle guy, buff, but like the nicest dude ever. And so he gets there, loads me up with Imodium and like liquid Tylenol, which is what I had been on the entire time in the hospital. Maybe my friends snuck some drinks in occasionally here and there because like a third of a beer after losing like 2.5 liters of blood, like you're good at that point. So you only need like half a beer and you're solid. Kills the pain. Not the right way to do it. I don't condone that. I'm not a medical professional, but it worked at that time. And then, they flew me back to the U.S. and it was the weirdest experience. I've never seen this. So I basically would get pulled into like a Lufthansa flight. They just strap me down on top of the seat, so you're about like an inch away from the vents, and then they just put kind of like blinds around you. And this is again how expensive this whole thing. I think the whole thing ended up being like $60K for the helicopter, the surgery, 8 days in the hospital there, and then
I'm surprised it wasn't more.
Well, I didn't have to pay for it. That $100 covered it all, and the insurance ended as soon as they dropped me off at a hospital in Dallas, and that's where it ended. And then thankfully, my dad knew the guy there. I showed up. He's like, "What do you need?" I was like, I think I'd like to try morphine. He did that, and I was like, okay, I don't need that anymore. But because I just did like liquid Tylenol, I was like, that was too much. But they were great after that. And then it ended up being about a 6-month recovery after that. They had to redo the whole surgery that was done there. They had botched the surgery, so they had to re-break the femur and redo the whole thing 6 months later, knee surgery. But it was actually one of the beginning of my entire life in some ways, because of not only was it an accident, but it was more 6 months to sit in bed in my parents' house and kind of think about, what am I doing with my life, and what do I really want to do with my life too. That's when being time alone with yourself to really start figuring out what's next and what should I be doing.
You have another recourse than to reassess.
Yeah.
Things, especially something that severe.
Yeah.
Where you were you were possibly inches from losing your life.
Right.
Had you, when it rotated you, had it flipped you to where you hit your head, you'd have been done.
Well, I was wearing a helmet. It hit hard enough that it broke the GoPro off, but just hard enough that, Marines are pretty durable. So, yeah.
Built that way.
Yeah.
So you take a 6 months recovery. Yep. When do you get back into, when's your first jump? How long did it take you to
Good question.
I'm assuming it wasn't a base jump. It was just a.
No. Yeah. So, I think I probably did my first skydive. That was 2015, 2016. I think I did my first skydive probably a year and a half after that. Was still kind of semi-actively skydiving, and I had this like thought in the back of my head, because at the same time as when I started in corporate America, so that was kind of an aha moment, like let's figure out some other ways to kind of grow up and start making, starting that second career. But I also thought I don't want to leave base jumping where it left off. So I always had this idea of how can I go back to Twin Falls specifically and do a few more jumps so you can at least leave on a positive note. And that was also where I realized like the amount of you need to invest, the amount of time you invest can also increase your chances of a positive experience. So I ended up going back to Twin Falls in 2018, did like 13 more jumps off the bridge. I can say they were all like the most perfect landings because that's all I was working on after that. But at that time I was like, okay, that was good. I don't need to do this anymore for now, but at least I know I left this on a good note. So I think I've got like 110 base jumps at this point. But last one was 2018, so I'm not an active base jumper. I say a failed professional base jumper because I was like, I want to be a professional base jumper. Now I'm like, you failed at it, but you learned a lot from it. It's not really a failure. It's more just a funny way to say it.
It's base jumping is, God, there's just so many fatalities.
Yeah.
I've met guys who are like, I started with about 10 friends, and now there's like 6 of us left. I'm like, hey, that's 60% is not exactly great odds when it comes to life.
Not great odds. So, yeah.
I mean, it gets you in the Hall of Fame as a baseball player, but
I don't think we have a Hall of Fame in base jumping.
No,
so it's probably good.
It's
you
just
have
list.
legends. That's
Shane. What was Shane's name? We just watched that documentary together. Conklin, right?
Shane McConkey. Yeah, that one's great. Yeah.
Hey, legend.
Legend.
What was the final cause? It was a parachute malfunction, right?
No, so he was very innovative. So I think he was doing a ski wingsuit base jump.
That's right.
In
Dolomites.
In a similar area. Yeah, I was in the Dolomites somewhere else. And so very technical. You have to be a skier, good probably to even get to that point where he exited. And their whole setup, they were using skis that I think were much older, but it was a way that they could release them.
And it didn't.
And the story is I think one didn't release, and then that kind of makes it hard to kind of manage your wingsuit at that point.
I got to get Miles Dasher on here because I know Miles Dasher was close to him and do a tribute to McConkey. Probably, and people wouldn't traditionally put them in this category, but probably one of the best athletes of our era. People just don't.
Yeah, and I think that's where you've seen this in all lines of work. Like somebody that impressive, you think, is there an ego on this guy? Like I met him a bunch of times at the bridge, some different events. He doesn't know me, but the nicest, most genuine guy at all times. I mean, I think the new Mission Impossible just came out where Tom Cruise was doing legit, moto base jumps, right? Like that jumping a motorcycle. I think he was the one that was helping him through that experience, which is he's just awesome. And thinking somebody that he must have, I don't know, probably 10,000 base jumps. I have no idea, tons, and still here, and I think probably a lot of that goes to how active he is, but just how he approaches the sport, I would imagine too.
I got to meet him briefly at the PIA in Reno, and then got to meet Jeff Provenzano.
For another one of the
legends,
the Red Bull Air Force guys.
Yeah. The Godfather of swooping. And it was very quick, but I've told Jeff I want him on the podcast. It's just timing. So I want to hit the two last things. Yeah. So Miles also helped Andy Stumpf set the initial wingsuit distance record, roughly around 18 miles, I believe it was, or
somewhere around. Yeah, it was
which then was broken by a Marine. At 19 miles in change.
A mile further, yeah.
And then you're going to give this an attempt through Legacy Expeditions.
Yep.
We're aiming for Memorial Day.
Yes.
Of next year.
2024.
And you've got basically a 9-month training plan.
Yes.
To get there.
Yeah. And I think learning from my mistakes, I think some people on paper would be like, that's not a lot of time. I probably have, 20 wingsuit jumps, skydive jumps, but those were 8-9 years ago. Yeah. The way I view this is, one, getting back into it is doing it the right way. We were talking about this yesterday. It's if you're going to do this, training so hard, getting the right coach to help you get there, and progressing at the right level. Wingsuits, they start off small, they get bigger, and the complexity and like the room for error and ability to fly them gets more and more tough. But as we know, like you can't take shortcuts in anything. So if you're going to do this, you need to progress slowly. You need to continue to get professional feedback and support to make sure that any sort of thing. I mean, we were just jumping, working on our pro license a month ago, and I mean, we were talking to Brad, who's just it was one of the best coaching I've ever gotten in skydiving. It was so, I mean, that would be good
and
coaching
for everyone.
outside.
That is Brad Cole out of Skydive DeLand, who's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, but just an amazing teacher. And he gave me a teacher, not an instructor. He's an amazing teacher.
Yeah, and the way he made the progression was so perfect. But he told me one thing when we were working on that too. He's like, hey, I didn't like this. This worked for that. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I failed previously. So we're going to cut that right now and, just continue to have him refine. We all left that and we were, just almost nailing it. And it was one of those, I was like, wow, okay. And just when you get bad habits, having that trusted instructor too, it's like, let's cut that right now and refine it and fix it.
For those listening, the pro card is the qualification within the USPA that allows you to jump into stadiums. If you ever watch those, what we call pro teams or demonstration teams. And so Legacy Expeditions is standing up the Folds of Honor skydiving team. We're going to be doing our first jump November 10th in Lake Nona in support of Folds of Honor, and then hopefully start jumping into these public events. But to get the card, you've got to land consecutively 10 in a row within this small box on a drop zone.
It sounds big, 20 feet by 40 feet or something
like that. And it's
not. Yeah,
no. And my ankle is still, I think I bruised the bone.
Yeah.
Because I had landed in the box, but with my speed, it was going to take me out. And I did one hard stomp with my heel. And I actually stayed in the box. It counted.
Yeah. It counts.
And actually, I did another jump into the box, and that's where I stopped. I think I've got to get like 2 more.
Yeah.
And it was a bone bruise. Yeah. It was pretty bad. I can still feel it. It's a lot better, but that was 4 weeks ago?
Yeah,
probably.
End of July, yeah.
And my ankle still... the bone hurts, but it's healing.
Yeah, I think with all of these things too, and I think to get back to what we're talking about too, especially after my accident, I think it set me up for this completely different journey I was never expecting, which was, okay, this sucked, your body's going to heal, but it was kind of also unveiled a lot of other things I had been dealing with, like that just hadn't thought about. From like a training accident, my first deployment we talked about briefly, near death incident and other things too. I was like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that I really need to work on, and it's taken me to this point, where I think with my purpose and why, I align so much with Legacy Expeditions too, and a lot of your guys' support and goals for Folds of Honor is my goal with Flight for Life is kind of what we're calling it, is how can I make a positive impact? And am I going to be the person that's going to go climb Mount Everest in like a record time or something like that? No, but I know my strengths. And so for me, at the end of the day, like breaking the world record, that'd be cool. Somebody else is going to break in a few years. That's just how it is, right? Good, right?
Training the next generation to be better than us.
Set the bar a little higher.
Yep.
Continue on. But what's the impact I could have with this, and to me, doing something for Folds of Honor, which my whole purpose in life at this point, we were talking about the other day, is I just want to help one more person. Yeah. And so with this, trying to raise money for Folds of Honor is the priority. I think we talked about this and we'll figure it all out, but I was like, I would fund this whole thing with my own money, just knowing the impact it could have with Folds of Honor, the impact it could have with the family and children of fallen first responders and military, providing them scholarships. That's everything to me, because at the end of the day, like that record's going to get broken one day, if you know, and I just want to not care about the record, but know that I had some sort of positive impact on just one person's life. They don't even have to know, like, Colin did this and this is where you're getting it from. I don't care. I don't care if they know it's me. I just want to know that somebody else is getting a benefit in life that then can set them up for success. And hopefully at the end of the day, you working with you, Will, over here too, is just making that impact, even if the credit doesn't go back to us. Like, how can I make somebody else's life better or help set them up for success to do the same? I
know for a lot of people, it's just like, well, you guys just do loud things. Yeah. and there is truth to that. Yeah. You know, modesty. I none of us can say we're high in modesty, doing what we do. Humility, I hope so. But if you're going to do things that break records, then they're loud by nature. And the reason we take on those challenges is because they're just that, they're a challenge. Yeah. Can I identify or be innovative or disruptive in a way where I can push that bar just a little bit higher? So I know Andy this week has been doing jiu-jitsu. He's at a jiu-jitsu camp. We'll connect you with him, and you know, he's a great coach. Yeah. And hopefully he can connect you with Miles Dasher, even if it's for a phone call. But I know we're going to attempt that in Tennessee. I'm excited personally because September 23rd, Mike Barker, who we call Boots, myself, Jim Wigginton, and Eddie Conway are going to go set the 43,000 foot record for skydiving in Tennessee. So it comes to Ada, and if you don't mind, I'm going to start this story here. So, you know, this whole Men's Journal thing started after I wrote the book, The Talent War. They did an interview on me. You know, the guy who wrote the article, we stayed on the phone and talked for quite a while, and I went into my everyday warrior philosophy. Hey, we're all warriors. It has nothing to do with a gun. Being a warrior is everything about a mindset. Never accepting the status quo, always pushing to the next level. And they eventually came back and said, hey, why don't you write a column called The Everyday Warrior for us? And I'm like, hey, why not? That's a great opportunity. Helps us get the word out on not only the talent war, but other things, leadership, excellence, resilience. And so the company then came to me and said, hey, we want to start an apparel brand. And we started, it was an 8-month process. We went to a branding agency out of Chicago, Soul Sight, which was, these people are so creative. Awesome.
Amazing work.
And from everything, they had me tell my life story, my philosophy. Ada was created. Why Ada? So, you know, you often hear like Ada boy, Ada girl. Yeah. But, you know, I kept saying with the journey, like there are no shortcuts. There are no hacks. Everything, you know, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. And we combine that, Ada. Yeah. How do you build a business? One brick at a time, one customer at a time. How do you grow muscle? One rep at a time. And so after 8 months of a lot of work with an amazing team, we launched Ada. I want to say, Will, it was March or April of 2020, 21? I think it may have been.
I don't know. I'm just saying, But
and literally, we had a press release go out on a Tuesday. I get a call from a very good buddy who was technically my boss. And he said, hey, don't spend any more money. And I'm like, and we had major legal agreements in place. Great company to work with, by the way. And I didn't even have to ask. I said, okay. I saw the writing on the wall. I think a week or two passed, and he calls back and says, hey, we're cutting away a number of our portfolio companies. And I said, I understand. Economic times, post-COVID were very interesting. And after back and forth, finally they said, hey, we'll give you this company. And I was actually shocked and humbled. And I said, okay. But I didn't have the bandwidth to re-stand up Ada, and I've held it. I said I kept it on the warmer. Yeah. And we left the site up without ever advertising. Some people would find it, make a purchase, but you saw that I had it, approach me and said, hey, I'd like to stand this back up and give it a shot. And I've been waiting for that one person to reach out with an olive branch and help me out. And here we are, and we're about to do a soft launch September 15th.
Yep, that's the goal.
You are taking the CEO spot. I know you have another job. This is a side thing. But what was it about Ada that sort of brought you in?
I think just looking at it, and it's something, my own personal journey, my own mental health journey, we don't have to go deep into that today, but, the pillars of ATA is mental, spiritual, physical. And I know that's like, I think those are some of the three most key parts to, a grounded life period. Like for me, every day, it's like, how can I do something from, my body? How can I do hard things? How can I, I don't want to go deadlift heavier. I don't want to go squat. I don't want to get in my cold plunge, but I do it. And I always feel better after that, or mental. For me, it's, doing breath work or meditation. Always feel even better after that. Or the spiritual part, whatever that means for people. I think there's something else that's there too. But I think the way that this is even more perfect, because I think there's a fourth thing, is community. And I was like, this literally is all the things I've been thinking about. And now there's this company that, you've been talking about it. There's a time on your part too. And I was like, I love everything about this, and I love the view of the website. It's not your average everyday thing when you would associate it with somebody like Mike and Colin. You're like, is this just going to be a bunch of like, we like all these hardcore things and that? No, I think it speaks to everybody. I don't think doesn't supposed to just speak to people from the military. It speaks to the everyday warrior community. And so when those four things, you combine them: community, spiritual, mental, physical. That's the things that I've been working on my life this entire year too. And I was like, I love that. I love that there's a brand around a community that's trying to do, one thing every day, whether one step at a time, one lift at a time. You can go all day. Attitude, there's so many plays on words, but I think at the end of the day for me, I just loved it. And I think I was pitching you some ideas too, and you're like, well, why don't we just do this? I was like, wait, I wasn't like really trying. I didn't think of it that way. I was just like, had some ideas of what we could do with this. And I was like, oh, I'd be honored. I think you're being humble about like, we're going to do this, but I was just, you said it was fate. And I was like, I didn't think about it like that. I just really love what you had here. I thought it was beautiful. And so I can see so much that we can do with this, especially, kind of probably the initial launch, there's still kind of some transitions out of the pandemic. And I think it's now a perfect time to bring it back to life. And I think there's a gap there in the world, not from like a customer segment, but like what people need, right? A lot of those things could mean something very different to everybody. Physical doesn't have to mean you're crossfitting every day. It could be doing yoga. Mental can be, maybe you're reading books, maybe you're growing your mind, maybe you're meditating, whatever that is too. I think it's so broad in a way with the four pillars and the community, the everyday warrior community. I think it's just beautiful. One thing, I nerded out on all the documents. I went back through everything too.
Oh, yeah.
The root word, like where does ATA come from? From battalion. You think about a battalion, you think community. And I was like, oh, because I was like, did some branding company just like, oh, just ATA, huh? No, from a word that's very familiar to us, but you translate it out to everybody, and the ATA just is a beautiful way to say it.
So you brought up the point, it comes from the root.
I read everything you sent me. I was like, I got to know everything about this.
And I'm excited about this because, one, I want something to be positive. I want it to be for everyone, regardless of your beliefs. Yeah. And I think people are searching so much for guidance, especially young men and young women, is for guidance, for coaching, for mentoring, more so to have a sense of homecoming and belonging. Yeah. And I believe you can, in this day and age, build virtual communities for which people can rally around with a positive message, with a very candid and direct message sometimes. Yeah. And it's an opportunity. I know we've got a ton of work, and to build a community is not easy, but the potential for the impact of, even the kids book, we were talking about that last night. We're writing that thing. And I don't want to say another thing about it.
I already kind of started working on it last night. You said it, and I was like, oh, I love everything. I'm part of that too. So every time you give me good ideas, I'm like, how can I figure that out? So,
that one is not a heavy lift. Yeah. You should have to find a very good artist.
I already talked to my sister just to see if she was open to it. She's an artist, but
there you go.
But we'll align.
So your attitude, and the reason I made that offer is that I'm like, you're authentic, you're genuine, you're kind, you're empathetic, you're respectful, you're everything I talk about when it comes to a warrior. Yeah. Again, I'm sure you were a great war fighter, and I just, quite frankly, I don't fucking care. Yeah. But you have a warrior mindset. You're never going to quit. I just want, the biggest fear I have is people are going to know this is going to be a military brand run by a bunch of military guys. Yeah. And that's not it. I think we've left that That was it is part of us, but it is behind us. And I am not a war fighter anymore.
Yeah. I think to exactly what you're saying, like when I think everyday warrior, I mean, obviously this podcast and a lot of the other things you've done with that, but I think whether you are somebody from the military, maybe you worked in supply, maybe you're a special operations, or whether you're just a mom trying to manage everything she needs to manage every day, you know, the thought of one step at a time, like, okay, what one thing can I do today, even if it's not going to be this perfect day where I got to meditate for 30 minutes and then I did like an hour yoga class. Like sometimes it doesn't work out, but how can you just move the ball forward a little bit every day is what I think the community speaks to. I think that's what makes it unique because I think also the work that we've been doing behind the scenes, you know, we're looking for quality products. We're looking for things that people want to wear, that's comfortable, that looks good, and that's clean.
And is a reminder.
And
hopefully puts a smile on their face with a reminder when their day is hard.
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Yeah. And we all need them, you know, like even yesterday, you know, like I came straight here. We were working a lot all day. I was able to do some stuff, but at the end of the day, I think I was texting you probably still, it was like 9 at night. I was like, I got to go for a walk because I didn't work out today. I was like, I got to do something. And so it was just a walk, but I was like one step at a time. And I was like, just get something there. And I'm still moving the ball forward. And I think it's beautiful.
Dude, the power of just a simple walk.
I had some questions for you though too.
Oh shit! Okay.
I think tie into a lot of our things, and I'm willing to try and answer them as well too. But you know, I think I was thinking a lot about our community, but I think a part of this community too is the honesty behind everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think when I think about the pillars that that are behind this brand, mental, physical, spiritual, the community. I think that also goes to, what does that mean for different people? And I have some questions around those. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them as well. Like, so I'll start on one kind of like on the physical side, and maybe it's even from like accidents. Cause like we've all had, like whether it's a car accident or whether you're 25 and you think you're the most coolest base jumper ever. And then, you almost die, there's all these setbacks. So what was one of your biggest setbacks physically and how did you overcome it yourself? And you can't say one step at a time yet.
No. So physically,
whether it's injury, whether it's
it's. Let me preface this question. Yeah. So here's what my military career looks like up to this point. Yeah. Boot camp, honorman. Yeah. Meritorious Lance Corporal, School of Infantry, honorman. Go to BRC. Yeah. I'm number 3 behind 2 guys that were both Rangers and snipers and both like sergeants picking up staff sergeants. Yeah. Corporal course, honor man. Get picked up I picked up corporal 6 months in the Marine Corps. Out of boot camp, I picked up 6 months out of boot camp, which is unheard of.
That is actually insane, especially in you're not old. It was just a little bit ago. So yeah.
So then, get picked up for the MESEP program very young as a corporal. Yeah. They send me back to school, go to OCS, honor man, and actually set 3 records. Highest leadership score ever, the O course, and also there's this British Marine sort of beep test. Yeah. And even the drill instructors were yelling because I was the last guy out of all the 200 officer candidates going back and forth, and they said I had the longest time ever.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you. And then
that's a record in a way. I guess.
And so then go to the SEALs, graduate BUDS, and I wasn't on in BUDS, but there was a question they asked: who would you most want to go to war with? And it's known as the Fire in the Gut Award, and it was Sorelli. Yeah. So I had success in the military prior to going to combat, and then you go to combat, and we're successful for the first 6 months of our 7 month, or actually 7 months of our 7 month deployment, and you start to think you have it figured out, and you're invincible. And then a grenade comes over the roof, and it requires one of my guys to jump on it. Yeah. And so the shrapnel through the legs, one I had to get debrided because the holes in my legs were deep, and for it to heal out, they had to debride it daily, which was painful. But it was both physically and mentally getting over that. Is that it crushed the foundation that I thought I had, and it was a realization that you're not as good as you thought you were, not even close. And somebody had to give their life for you to recognize this. But physically, I had shrapnel in my legs still, and it took me a while to get back, and the guys were resetting to start working up for another deployment. And I just had to fight and I had Derek Benson was pulling shrapnel out of my legs that whole workup, and then Derek was killed on Extortion 17. Handsome dude, handsome. I mean, just like graded everything.
Yeah, and I think that's where it sometimes that to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one in reflection. It's like my accident or any failures out of my life. I think it's one of those where the dark side is the good. So it's like, if I hadn't have had that experience, like that ego check, where would I be today? Because, I think sometimes I was crushing so many things, but getting such an incredible ego check, do you feel like it also it got you to where you were today because you also had that moment of, oh, I'm not perfect, or I'm mortal. I'm capable of getting these incredible setbacks too.
It was the classic Dunning-Kruger effect. I was on the top of Mount Stupid.
Yeah.
Think of it. Thinking I had
mountain.
That I thought I was better than I was. I thought I was smarter than I was. I thought I had more experience than I had.
Yep.
And that started me down the slope of despair. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long time, probably years later, and on my 10th deployment before I'm like, okay, I think I'm starting to figure out life, and I think I'm starting to figure out this thing called war.
Yeah.
And by that time, it was like your time's done. You're done in the military.
Just two more questions. They're all really easy. They're so not hard at all. But again, kind of thinking of our pillars with Ada, but have you ever been in a tough place mentally, and what did you do that helped you get through it? So you don't necessarily go through details, but like when you've been in those places mentally where you're like maybe in a funk or maybe in a dark place, what did you do that helped you get through it?
So it was after I left JSOC.
Yeah.
They sent me by myself directly to Austin, Texas, where there is no military unit. And so for the last two...
Great community.
I know.
Nobody.
Yeah. And I wanted that. I wanted to be in a silo. I wanted to be isolated. I didn't want to be around the military anymore, but technically was still getting my MBA. And I just got dark. I was drinking. I was fighting. I was womanizing because I was freshly divorced. Suffer in silence. You had said it earlier. It took an individual to say, hey, what the hell are you doing? And connect me with a guy named Dr. Chris Free, who worked with me for a year. And then, I met my wife, Jordan. So I finally learned the power of just saying, hey, something's not right. I need help. Yeah. And so that's what truly was my introduction to vulnerability, and that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. And I could have gotten better a lot quicker.
I think for me too, I had, sometimes I forget things, maybe, I don't know, bouncing off the ground or other, maybe too many explosions, but I wrote 8 rules for myself, and my very first rule for myself is it's okay to ask for help. I think ego or just scared of what people are going to think for you, but I know with you, I just recently met Will. I can see it in his eyes. Like, I trust this guy too. And it's like, it's okay to be like, hey, I'm not winning today, and when you find those trusted people, it's okay to ask for help. And if somebody doesn't help you, doesn't mean they don't care, but it's okay to ask for help. Final question. And it kind of goes along the same lines as the last one too, but I think about the community aspect as well, because I think it's so important, right, to find individuals that are around you that you can trust. But just in life, who do you turn to when you need help? Like right now, like if I got this going on, I got that going on. You don't have to say names, but who are the people you're like, those are the people I'm going to go to now that I know care about me, and if I need something business related advice, maybe it's relationship advice, any of that, who do you go to?
So I believe in quality over quantity. And so I also believe heavily in tribe. Mm-hmm. And I wrote about it in the Everyday Warriors. Yeah. A tribe is everything. Is one, Jordan. Yeah. That's my number one confidant. She's my best friend always. But there are some things you can't bring to your wife, or you don't want to bring to your wife. One, you don't want to scare the hell out of her when you're like, business is not going well. Yeah. We may have to cut back. Yeah. So I turn to guys like you, my tribe, and just simply say, hey, bro, I need your opinion on something. This is what's going on. This is what I'm thinking. And it's amazing how we can talk each other off a ledge and be like, hey, dude, you've got this. And in fact, if I can help you, hey, do you need me to cover something for you? Like, let me send you $1,000. I got you.
Yeah,
that's an extreme case, but
I actually need $1,000 too.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
I'll Venmo you a request. But I think that's everything too. When you think about it, like you also don't know everything. And then I've had so many times where I'll finally like just, hey, bro, I've been struggling with this. What do you think? And they'll give me this perspective. I'm like, what was I even worried about? Like just getting that other perspective. You're like, oh, there's such an easy way to navigate this. I just didn't maybe have the tools or resources to think it of myself, but there's always a solution. Sometimes you just might not be able to have it yourself, and you have those trusted people you can go to.
Everyone needs mentors and coaches, and usually they're the same in their lives. If you don't have one, you're basically handcuffing or crippling yourself to accelerating or maturating or evolving at a quicker rate. And I mean, we are products. Great leaders are a product of the mentors and coaches they had in their lives.
Yes.
If you want to think of Admiral McCraven, or I'm thinking of, Margaret Thatcher or Winston Churchill, they are all a product of these amazing people throughout their lives who rarely get the credit for the person that they molded and shaped into the leader that they were.
The only follow-up I'd say to that is, I don't know the quote exactly right, but like, the people you see, today and what they've done, like you don't see all that work that it took to become that person that's in that limelight. Sometimes we see those people, it's like, how could I ever be that? And it's having people in that journey that no one ever sees that gets you there.
And for a lot of people, they have to understand that I actually say it, I'd rather be a kingmaker than a king.
Same.
You stay out of the line of fire. No, I've one of the most valuable things in life, and it's taken me a while to learn this, is to find more joy in other people's accomplishments than my own.
Yeah.
And I'm the type of guy, I've said this before, is where like a commanding officer after a mission would be like, Mike, that was great, you guys. Like, don't pat me on the back.
Yeah.
Like, go talk to the guys.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need that. I don't want that. And I'm fine with it, man. I love to brag about my tribe. I love to brag about my tribe because I think very few people have a authentic, genuine tribe.
Yeah.
People that will be there when things are hard.
Those ride or dies,
Those ride or dies, as Fast and the Furious would say. Good. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Yeah. Guys, go check out liveatta.com.
Yep.
You're going to see this in the infancy. You're going to see this grow. And I know with the determination of not only Colin, but myself, it's not going to be an easy road. It's going to be a fun road. It's going to be a journey. We want you to come along. Please go make a purchase. I hate to ask that. Yeah. If it especially touches out and reaches you on some level. And we're also going to be doing a lot of good for these foundations that are helping first responders, veterans, and other people. So go check that out. Again, thanks for joining the podcast. Remember, go to your preferred platform, whatever it is, Spotify, Apple, like this podcast, leave a review. This is how we get better. Please leave your comments. They mean the world to us, and we do read them all. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.